Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our podcast, Moms on the Move. I'm Jen Wills.
And I'm Ashley Steigerwald.
We have JaQuinda Jackson with us from Jackson Consulting. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
She came highly recommended.
Highly recommended.
Highly recommended, yeah. Oh. We put out a little, we had been approached by, honestly, multiple people to have a conversation with somebody about how to navigate COVID in families. And your name came up. And then we decided, let's make it kind of broader than this. Yeah. Because, yes, COVID is obviously a huge issue at the moment. But I think bigger than that a little bit is just how this past year has gone with respect to just differences with people. Families, friends, how to navigate conversations and just keeping their respect there. Right. So if you want to tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay. So I am a trauma therapist. I actually refer to myself as holding the hope for people. People come to me broken, and I do a lot of trauma work, treating different types of trauma, from house fires to sexual assault, physical assault, emotional toll, treating it all. And to be very transparent with COVID, we have seen an influx with anxiety, sleep disturbance, because our lives have truly been disrupted.
Yeah. Everything's changed.
And you see adult and
children.
Yeah.
Who are you seeing the most come in?
Really adults.
Adults. Okay. And kids are more resilient with this?
Kids are sponges. So how the parent responds is how the child responds. So if mom is out of whack, child's out of whack.
Yeah.
And I always say, in order for the house to be stable or for us to have any type of balance, the head has got to be okay. And you got to take care of yourself before you can take care of others.
You really do. I mean, I know that. I know if I'm having a really bad day as a mom, the boys, you can just see there more.
Well, because our tone changes.
Yes.
You get
that body language.
They feel all of
that. They do. They feel your energy coming off. I've had times where I'm in the door 5 minutes and one of my kids is like, "You okay?" I'm like, "No, I'll be right back." And I got to run to my car and get myself back in order and realize I can't bring this into my house.
Right. But by doing that, though, you're teaching your kids it's okay not to be okay.
That's true. Yeah.
And when I'm not okay, I need to be self-aware to know, I need a break.
Yeah. Yep.
Because what happened with COVID, it was we went from doing our own thing, I'm going to school or baby going to daycare and I'm going to the office, to
everybody's here.
Why are you here?
Why are you always here?
My husband the other day, he was like, "Does he always cry like that?" And I'm like, "Where have you been?"
Yeah.
Where have you been? But so we are learning to adapt to each other, and we are learning that for a lot of us, we just don't have the skills.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's been a lot of pressure on families, and whether it's people that have, and I'm saying people, but a lot of the times it's the moms that are home doing the homeschooling while also trying to work. And so they have all this pressure, and possibly, there was a mom specifically, one of my friends reached out and said she has not been able to leave her house in a year because one of her kids has an autoimmune, and so they've been so nervous, so they've been in their house. And prior to that, they were just very social people. So she's she's not in a good headspace mentally. And another person said, what do you do when you feel a certain way about seeing your family? I want to live in the moment now, but your family's nope, we can't see you. How do you navigate and not have hurt feelings?
Well, the reality of it is that you have to choose self. You have to identify your own personal boundaries. You have to recognize, this is what I am going to tolerate, and this is what I'm not going to tolerate. I respect you here, but this is what I'm going to do, or this is what me and my family are going to do. And to be quietly frank, we don't do that enough. We don't have these difficult conversations that we need to have. So when something happens, because we don't have the skills, it's like we don't know how to talk about it.
And it just
Right.
builds.
And
So
it
we're not-
builds and
yeah.
it builds, and then your perception of the events is completely different than mine. And instead of talking about it to figure out where your headspace is, we are just left to assume. And we all know we're not supposed to assume, but
Right.
And then you create a false narrative, or you make a false narrative for someone else, and instead of having that really uncomfortable conversation for 10 minutes, setting your boundaries,
Right.
you either allow someone to infringe on yours, and then you build up that resentment. You know, and it and then, like you said, it just builds until sometimes you have that explosion, or sometimes you build that false narrative where you start to resent that other person.
Right.
And what you said about having that difficult conversation, and having the courage to have that difficult conversation to understand if that person doesn't respect your boundaries for what is good for you and your family,
But
then you need to reevaluate
because they probably take it personal.
that. They do.
Yeah.
But you have to choose you. Like, you have to, the saying, you know, if you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for that.
Everything,
But
yeah.
like, you have to say, this is my belief, like, this is my line, and this is it. And I think for the past few months, relationships have begun to shift because we now know where certain people stand. And to be honest, like, I mean, we still gotta somehow coexist, but to know, like, this is you and this is me. And then I have the ability to choose how to navigate our relationship.
Right.
Yeah.
And even with our kids, I mean, as a trauma therapist, I see anywhere from a sex worker to a very great nurse, but who just had a very traumatic childhood, but the ability to, like, process through and identify, like, this is what makes me feel like this, and this is why. And being able to communicate it to other people is so important.
Yeah.
And my kids, we have tough conversations, and sometimes I'm all, you know, people ask me, they're like, do you overshare with your kids? Because
Yeah.
my son was, you know, the 3-year-old in the class telling everybody about his pants.
Right.
But we know body,
Yes.
Like,
It's important.
correct terms.
right?
So
And,
important.
you know, I was working a case, and he asked a question, and, you know, I shared, and I think it's very important to be honest and authentic with our kids so that when they leave us, they
Yep.
can replicate that with other kids.
Yes.
And like you said, using the proper words, and I find when my kids were little, it's giving them the true but simple explanation using the proper words versus making up words or trying to sugarcoat it, or we're not going to talk about this, because then you start to build the shame. Well, I asked mom about this and she got weird and didn't want to talk,
Right.
so this must be bad.
Or when something happens at a very young age
Yeah.
and we don't talk about it, or it was never brought to my attention, so I just hide it.
Yeah.
And then you grow up to be broken adults.
I'm very open with the boys about that stuff.
Yeah.
Because it terrifies. It scares me, all the abuse that's out there, and it's usually people that you know, and so I like constantly we talk about it and talk about it and talk about
And
it.
even managing emotional piece too, because COVID has also taught us that we love our electronics. Like, we love them. I remember, like, the third day, I was like, we got to get better Wi-Fi. Like, if we're going to do this, we need better Wi-Fi.
Unacceptable.
I remember yelling at my kids, "Who's sucking up all the internet?"
Yeah. And I'm like closing stuff, like closing tabs. But, you know, seeing what we see on social media and being able to rewatch it and rehear it and getting into these debates. I mean, that's vicarious trauma.
Yeah.
And we don't discuss that, but that's real.
Yeah. I mean, right now, you know, this kind of goes into what we were going to talk about broader, but everything has become so polarizing and like divisive. And I think like people get that strength again on social media, which we've talked about. You
Behind
know,
the screen. You
behind
get-
the screen.
you get real
we talked about
brave.
this on
Really
the bullying episode.
Yeah.
People say things because they feels like this empowerment behind a screen that you wouldn't normally say in person. But I think once COVID hit, everyone was at home, everyone was feeling pretty yuck, and then it's an election year, it's all this stuff, and it's gotten so polarizing, and I feel like we're lacking just like the respect for each other if you have a different view. So instead of accepting, like I'm from New Jersey. I have friends that are, feel very differently in certain things than I might. But I respect, like, my best friend enough. We always have these conversations because I respect her opinion and her outlook on things. And but I feel like that's gotten rare.
Well, we've talked about this once before, dehumanization. It's this idea that if you think different than me, I can put a label on you of this political party, or you support this social justice organization, and therefore I can put a label on you, and then I can remove your humanity.
Right.
And that to me is very dangerous when we start to dehumanize.
It is a lot of labels.
Yes.
Lots.
Yeah. Because labels are easier than looking at a human and saying what you really think.
Right.
Yeah.
And
way
it's a
easier.
mask that you can walk around in.
Yes.
Which goes back to the whole idea of setting boundaries. Because I believe, too, some people you just have to cut off. Like, you have this stance and this is what it is. But even if for other relationships, it might not be that easy. Or I might not want to. Like, I can choose to live with your separate belief, but being able to be conscious of the conversations that you do have and respecting each other. Because that's what I teach my kids. Like, my saying in my house is I want to leave the world better than how I found it. And I want to teach my kids just to be better humans.
Yeah.
Like, even if you disagree, you have respect for one another.
Yeah. Right. And it is, people are brought up so differently. Again, we were joking this week. I was talking to friends, but like the words we say up north are different. And that's just a silly example. But, things that we did growing up aren't what you find down here. And so a lot of times beliefs and how you grew up shapes you as a person.
Absolutely.
And, the way my kids are growing up. And I mean, a lot of it, you can obviously change. People can change. But I think, like, this whole idea of, like, fighting on Facebook and blah, blah, like, that's just...
And I can make you change.
Thank you. You're
like,
going to change somebody's mind.
You're going to change me right now because of the one sentence you said. It's not going to happen. Like, in order, you need to have, like, authentic conversations, I think. And it's funny because sometimes I'll even call my friend because she was a political science major. So I just love her opinions. And even this whole Meghan Markle thing. We were just talking about all this stuff and we were just going and talking. But again, if you respect people enough, you have to realize that you're allowed to have different opinions.
And
you
it's
can
okay.
still be best friends.
And it's okay.
It's okay. It is okay.
And I'll put the caveat on this. It's okay to have different opinions so long as they're not harmful. That's the thing that I noticed last year is there were some folks that I was loosely associated with on social media and I realized, like you said, and it's easier to do it when it's an acquaintance. I can't even go there because what you're saying is harmful and dangerous and I need to just completely remove you off my feed. Thank you very much. Goodbye. But it's harder when it becomes a really close family, a really close friend, a close coworker, where I feel like especially this past year, people I thought I knew, all of a sudden you're like, ooh, exactly. Ooh, you're not what I thought you were, and here are my values, and yours are so far off from mine that I'm starting to realize maybe we're not. This is not the relationship, friend wise or however that I thought this was going to be. I think, and in a way, it was very ugly on social media, but it was really telling, I thought, the way a lot of people were reacting.
And even in like a part of trauma therapy, it's knowing who's in your circle, like knowing the people who are like pouring into you, like is it promoting you? Are they keeping you safe? Like if you were not in the room, would they have your back? Like all of that goes to play like in real life. And if the opinion is harmful to your life or to your kids, then you gotta cut it off.
But different doesn't mean harmful necessarily either.
No, but I think there's a line there. I think there's a line where you have to say, this is so far off of my values that that that's, at some point there are some relationships you grow away from. And again, different can be just that different, but I do think some opinions are just so, for me personally, off my values that I can't reconcile that.
And not even like I'm cutting you off and I wish you like ill will.
No.
But this is where the relationship
Yeah.
ends.
Yeah.
And
So for trauma therapy, when somebody comes in with, and like you said, it looks like you cover a variety of trauma. I wanted to get into that definition of trauma because I think, at least for me, I've learned a lot in the past couple years. I've become really good friends with a few different people who are therapists who live in different parts of the country, and I've realized my definition of trauma was a very small scope of, like you said, the car accident, the house fire. But trauma can be much more nuanced than that. It doesn't have to be a violent sexual assault. It could be years of built up small childhood traumas that then shape an adult. So talk about that definition of trauma, and at what point does somebody who maybe thinks I've experienced trauma, do I need to go and talk to somebody?
trauma definitely is both physical, emotional. Anxiety can be the root of trauma. The need to like always be right or be perfect can be rooted in trauma and in how our childhood experiences presented themselves. Even what we're experiencing now, I believe that we're all going to walk away with some type of secondary trauma in regards to how things were put in place for us and then how our whole lives shifted. Because a lot of us have started to experience like lack of sleeping, feelings of out of control, headaches, stomach ache,
Worry.
all of those are symptoms
So much worry.
of
Fear.
trauma.
Yeah, fear.
And what happens is that we may feel some type of way and then our feelings get replicated on social media. So by picture or like video or even like friends like sharing things and your text messages can induce trauma. And just because you experience trauma doesn't mean you are stuck and you can't overcome it. But the idea of trauma therapy is to really like process through it.
So talk through it a lot.
Talk through it, develop effective coping skills, because I think too, COVID has told us that some of us love wine a little too much, or we've had it consecutively to cope or like to fall asleep. But trauma therapy helps you develop healthy coping skills and to gain foresight. So like if you're a parent, on how to protect your children.
Yeah.
Because when you experience trauma, that means something bad has happened to you, whether physically or emotionally. Something bad has happened to you that you had no control over. So the idea of doing trauma work is to gain control, like in a healthy way.
That skill part I think was important because you said that earlier, and I meant to touch on it, so I'm glad you circled back on that. But it's a skill. There are coping skills. And I think some people think, like you said, I just suck at this. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. It's a learned skill. And it's not something that some of us are innately good at, and you have to practice it.
You have to practice.
Yeah.
And you have to be aware of if you are lacking a certain skill. Because life has taught us go, 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 and it has like slowed us down. And when you don't have so many distractions, you're only forced to look inward and to do your own work. I think those who are struggling with anxiety realize that they are out of control and realize that they need help.
I feel triggered.
Everybody need a therapist. Even your therapist needs a therapist because life is real, and unfortunately we can't wake up on an island with no worries in the world. I mean, there are things that that shift and shape all
Yep.
through the day that we can control and can. But being able to really like do your work so that you don't get stuck there, or you know, you don't get so out of whack that you can't function.
Yeah. I think my anxiety, like my worry and fear has kind of escalated lately. Just you know, what's it going to look with COVID, honestly. With just a lot of it. Just all the negative stuff right now. You know, I look at the kids and I look at them and I feel it. Like, you know, maybe I'm more aware of it as I'm older, but I don't remember this even 5 years ago ever feeling so heavy. You know, I mean,
which is why you have to be very transparent with self and with others and have authentic conversations and kind of identify ways to help you manage. Because I tell people all the time, fear, sadness, it's all real, and your feelings are valid, and you're going to feel them. But being able to manage through them, because what you don't want to happen is that it leak on your children.
Right.
But you talked about emotions, and you can come off base on this, but just for me personally, I've come to realize through my work with, you know, therapy that I have a habit of mislabeling emotions. So I'll say, I'm feeling anxious, and that was my coverall. I'm feeling anxious, and that's what I would say. Well, no, I'm fearful. I'm fearful. I'm feeling overwhelmed with the amount of work I have, or I'm not sure how to handle the situation with my kid. And so those times where I feel anxious, I then have to really break it down of what am I really feeling? Same with anger. You know,
secondary emotion.
Well, it's the root cause of the emotion. The anxiety, I think, is a symptom of the real emotion. It was breaking down fear, breaking down anxiety into what those really were. You know, and it's a constant struggle for me, because I want to just it's easy to say I'm anxious, I have anxiety.
And anxious is a very nice word.
It is. Well, and it's become acceptable. I feel like anxiety, you hear a lot of moms like, I'm feeling anxiety, which is totally valid. I don't want anybody, like, I if were to ask me, I would say I suffer with anxiety, but it's taken me time to dig that layer.
To the root of anxiety.
Yeah, because I was treating the anxiety. I was going to doctors to treat the anxiety medication, which just masked what was really going on. So the anxiety never went away. Right. And I would get frustrated of, why am I seeing these doctors and taking these medications and still feeling the same? It's because I'm dealing with it.
And I tell parents all the time, every behavior has a root feeling to it.
Is anger a root feeling? Yeah.
Sometimes I think anger can be fear. Sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think anger is a legitimate emotion. And it's okay to feel angry. I think that's something important that kids understand too. Yeah.
And to be able to say, I feel angry. However, taking a step further, why are you angry? Like, how did we get there? What does it look like every time that you're angry?
What does it feel like?
What does it feel
That's
like?
what my therapist always asks me. What does it feel like? And then I'm like, okay, well, anxiety feels like I can feel tingling in the back of my leg. And so it's then understanding that body response. So when I feel it coming on, I can identify it and start to work through it before I'm like full-blown
go there.
Anxiety attack, like spiraling out.
Because you can talk yourself down. Once you develop the coping skills, you can talk yourself down.
So is it just like recognizing the feelings?
Mindfulness, being really present.
And being present with self.
And boundaries.
And healthy boundaries. Healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
Even you got to have personal boundaries.
Right.
Talk about that for a second.
Oh, chill. So I've been going to the gym 4:30 in the morning. That's my personal boundary for myself. It's my personal boundary and my self-care boundary, because mama needs to work out. Mama feel better when she works out.
That's hard. I struggle with the personal boundaries. I really struggle with that.
But you know what? Kids learn. That's where our kids learn boundaries. I know.
You're calling me out today.
I know. And it's easy.
I feel like I'm back on the finance episode where I went home and was like, I need to get myself out.
But it's easy to kind of like, oh, I can sneak it or nobody's watching it.
So, like, you know, is it really important then to talk to just be your true self and like talk. Like, does the boundary come with, hey, this is why I feel this way and this is what's going to have to happen? Like, is that how you set them?
It's sometimes it's a conversation,
Yeah.
or sometimes it's just like total like action.
Okay.
Like, I'm just not gonna go there, or when we go there, I'm just not gonna do it.
Okay.
And like the personal boundary, it sounds like that keeping your promise to yourself. Like you said, I go to the gym every day at 4:30, and that is my personal boundary. So it sounds like you've made a decision. This is what I do, and I don't break promises to myself, and that's what I have a problem with. Because I'll put everybody else's.
I was gonna say, but we do a
I
lot
know,
for other people,
but we won't do it for ourselves. I know.
And you matter, even if it's for 30 minutes.
I think that's like a woman thing. You know?
I mean,
It's that caretaker.
and we do it so naturally, but we have to remember that we got to take care
Of ourselves.
of us first.
Yeah.
Because if mama not okay, nobody gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's that you talked about a symptom of trauma can be people pleasing, where you want to take care of other people and you want to make other people happy, and it's important not to let other people around you down. And it's remembering that applies to you too. And that's, I think, a real struggle for a lot of women and people, or that like hyper independence. Hyper independence is an indication of trauma. You know, if you're can't ask for help.
Or if you had to be the independent child early
Taking
in
care of
life, and you had to
siblings.
take care of your siblings, and
Yeah. It's okay to ask for help. Yeah. It manifests, you think, it just, yeah, it manifests in so many different ways.
I think that's also a spiral, because then you're like, I got it.
Yeah. Even asking your spouse for help.
for help, absolutely.
Yeah.
And being vulnerable to ask for help.
Don't use that word. We can't go Brene Brown here. Like, if the vulnerability, the whole vulnerability shame thing is, the vulnerability is my, I can't. I have a really hard time with that.
Really?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Because vulnerability is weakness. Or it puts you out there for rejection. Because if you're vulnerable and your true authentic self for someone and they reject you.
So when you're vulnerable, you either have been hurt because you have been vulnerable, or you were vulnerable and something bad has happened.
So then you're afraid to go back
And then
there.
you're afraid to go back. So you're like, you know what? I can keep me safe, so I'll do it, or I got
You got
it.
your walls up.
Well, and I think that the safety thing is really important, because that's you know, you get that negative mindset in your head of, I have to keep myself safe, so I can't be vulnerable, I can't be authentic with other people. And part of letting that go for me was not being shameful of that, but saying that was a useful tool at some point. At some point, that was what actually did keep me safe. But I'm in an environment now where maybe I don't need that anymore. And to then try to, you said that skills, coming back to what is a different skill I can use instead of holding myself back from other people that's going to serve me better moving forward.
And am I making a decision for self, or am I making a decision because I'm trying to survive? And most of us have had to live to survive. Where in doing trauma work, it's rethinking how you, A, perceive the world, and B, how you operate in the world.
Because your brain is still in that survival mode versus that thrive, you know, that your brain's still in that limbic fight or flight. And it's getting out of that. Because it worked.
It worked.
It worked. And so then it's trying to find a different way to do it.
So like 3 overall tips for like people right now. Just again, like the boundaries, talking stuff out.
Boundaries, knowing when you're not okay, and allowing yourself to be uncomfortable for uncomfortable situations and uncomfortable conversations.
Because it'll help you.
It'll
get
help.
better.
And then you're not avoiding. Because the growth happens when you're uncomfortable.
When you're uncomfortable, that's the only way we grow.
That's not fun. Why can't we grow in the safe box of comfort?
If we grew in a safe place, we would never grow.
I know.
That's like this little podcast.
Yeah.
Like, we were so uncomfortable to start this.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah. Where can they find you? Someone's watching this and say,
Yeah.
So I am on Facebook at JaQuinda Jackson, And or you can find me on Instagram at Dr. JaQuinda Jackson.
Dr. JaQuinda Jackson.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, this was great.
So important.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. We'll have a whole episode on vulnerability one day, and
Yeah.
I'll call in sick and let y'all handle it.
Well, thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, everybody, for watching. We want to thank our sponsors real quick. So thank you to Wilson Associates, Prime Lending, Parham Smith and Archenhold, and Blackacre.
Yes, we appreciate you all. Thank you so much. So the market, you've heard, it's a hot market right now. So if you're thinking about selling, and now is the time, because there are so many buyers out there who can't find a house. And then when you find that perfect house, you're going to call Amanda McCall at Prime Lending to get your loan going.
Yep.
And then when it's time to close, you're going to call Archenhold and Parham.
Blackacre.
And Blackacre. Yep.
And when you're going to list your house, you're going to call Ashley and I.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you again. Have a good one.